and welcome back around the bonfire after a much needed, I guess we'll call it a couple days off. Taking some examples from Mike McGee on that one. We're back with some fire news, some updates, and as always, the speculation that keeps you coming back for more. I've got Tim and DJ in the building with me today, as we are all kind of, well, not all. 2/3 of us are hiding out from 8 inches of snow that got dropped in the last 24 hours. And DJ is probably sitting on his back porch in some kind of sun-friendly outfit. I don't know. Fellas, how are we feeling?
Yeah, there was a lot of snow very early in the year. But, and the ironic thing, of course, is like not this year, but like the Vancouver Whitecaps last year were in a play-in spot. This year, they were playing at home, made it to MLS Cup next week. And the Fire could be in that position next year, right? Like it would be the same size jump. It would be, obviously huge if that happened, but there could have been a home playoff game going on in that weather. And next year, obviously, the conference final will be even later. So
yeah. I can't wait to see the Fire play in 10 inches of snow.
Hey, look, I mean,
CPL final vibes, which is honestly awesome. I'm here for it.
I was going to say that was a great game. Like that was a lot of fun. And if you're telling me we had the opportunity for that, but an MLS Cup, I think I would take it just about every time. Although I don't think there would be a quicker way to get the league to go fully in on the neutral site venue for MLS Cup than having to potentially go to Chicago in the middle of November, December. Although obviously that changes in 2026 or 2027, excuse me. I actually, this wasn't even on the thing, but Tim, you mentioned MLS Cup officially set. Vancouver Whitecaps facing off with Inter Miami. And if we can, fellas, I would love for a quick, give me your 10-second take and who you're picking in that game. Obviously, both teams famously losing to Chicago Fire in embarrassing fashion. Neither team getting a win against. So in some ways, Chicago Fire did win MLS Cup this year. In some ways, they won it twice. It's tough to say for sure.
I just support Bears. I just hope that a group of Sun Bears just come out on the field and just the game gets canceled.
Okay.
Are there a ton of Sun Bears around Fort Lauderdale?
I mean, I'm sure there can be. I mean, if you know the right guy, there can be plenty of anything down there.
Yeah. There's definitely plenty of exotic animals around Florida. That's true. Yeah. No. Look, it was a heck of a game by Vancouver. And like, I think that, obviously it's kind of Inter Miami's to lose, like Supporters Shield, all the Barca guys, like a number of them getting their last chance to compete for a championship as a player. And at the same time, you just feel like, man, Vancouver are really on it. Like the way that they have just like ship of Theseus their way to MLS Cup with like key players missing. And like, they will have Tristan Blackman back. They have Brian White back. Seb Berhalter has emerged as like one of the best midfielders in MLS out of like being almost left off of MLS rosters, just a couple of years ago. And I don't think you want to count them out. And like, I just think it's going to be a hell of a game just with like those, like that team and that story competing against Miami and the talent that they have.
This really does feel like the big bad evil money corporation versus the power of friendship, which I think in a lot of ways it is. No, I'm right there with you, team. I mean, Brian White with a brace in the Western Conference Finals is not nothing. I mean, a ton of credit to San Diego for one of the craziest inaugural seasons. Not the best, of course, not the best, but one of the best.
Best regular season by an expansion team ever. Go ahead and hang the banner, San Diego. It's all yours.
Yeah, interesting. No cup though, so I don't know if it really counts. Actually,
exactly. That's why the banner's a little bit smaller. The banner's just about the regular season.
Yeah, but no, I'm with you. I think I would be. I don't think I'd be shocked if Miami won. But given the form Seb Berhalter is in, and that you do have somebody of comparable status on the other side, and Thomas Muller, like I don't know. I'm rooting for Vancouver. I'm going to pick Vancouver because if I picked Miami, I feel like my entire soul would be lost, and then. What's the point of doing anything?
I mean, I hope Vancouver wins, but at the same time, I'm not going to be shocked if Miami wins.
Look, if Vancouver doesn't win, right? Like it's a different narrative. And I think that just is the perspective here, right? Like if Vancouver wins, that's awesome. And everyone's really happy for them. And there's going to be a lot of thrilled, like neutrals around MLS. If Miami does not win, it is an abject failure. And the same isn't true of Vancouver.
Yeah. No, I think no matter what.
I want to point out, John, Floridians all hate Miami. We all hate Miami.
What are
That
your
is
feelings
valid.
about Fort Lauderdale, where they're still playing for this one?
There's
I
no
mean,
difference.
are we pretending like their new stadium isn't also near Fort Lauderdale? I don't think their new stadium is in Miami proper, is it?
I believe it is in Miami proper.
I could have sworn it was still up towards Fort Lauderdale, but who knows? Who's to say? I guess somebody is to say.
It doesn't
It's just
matter.
not
It's
me.
going back into the water soon.
Yeah, I hate Miami regardless. No, yeah, well put though, DJ. It's like, anyway, we're all pulling for Vancouver. I think we'll add that on the list of teams we root for right after Valor FC, which has officially folded. Portland Heart of Pines, which has not folded. And
also Valor FC, where Diego Conix was, loaned for the rest of the season. Technically not folded. They technically are just like, we're just not going to play for some amount of time.
Okay, so it's kind of like
owned by
the
the
North
Winnipeg
Carolina FC situation.
Owned by Winnipeg Football Group, who also own, they're mostly the Winnipeg Blue Bombers CFL team. The team had the organization had record profits, which is only $7 million, and you could easily spend that on stuff around a soccer team if you wanted, even without a ton of money on players. But it's disappointing that they didn't really want to invest in the product and try to grow it there. Yeah, anyways, off that box.
Yeah, we'll move on here. I'm sure you'll get more Valor FC content from us at some point. We'll find a new Canadian Premier League team to support wherever another Fire 2 player gets loaned out to in the future, I guess. Let's start with the joke I tried to make at the beginning, and I don't know that it really landed, which was Chicago Fire officially announced their schedule for 2026 with Mike McGee's day off, Tim making his acting debut, which I gotta tell you, man, it was impressive. It was good stuff there from Tim. Go ahead and give it a watch if you haven't. A couple crossovers from the Western Conference here. Fire get Houston, Vancouver, Portland, Seattle, Colorado, and Sporting KC. Colorado, the interesting one. It's the first time in 6 years that they'll face off, and by the time they play, it'll be 8 years since they had last been to Colorado. So that is an away day. Fire still will not play Austin. They're just never going to do it, apparently, at least in league play, I should say. Fellas,
we're just waiting for the crew to get relocated to. The crew to get relocated to the other C city in Ohio. And then there's going to be the Wexner guys that are like that family that's super wealthy in the Columbus area are going to pay to relocate Austin to Columbus, and justice will somehow be served in the long run.
Jeez.
No one expects the San Jose Earthquakes Part 2.
No, look, ironically,
right.
I feel like being in Columbus is the only thing keeping the crew alive. Because if they move to Cleveland, I feel like they're going to get the Browns stink on them because they're owned by the Haslams, right? So the only thing keeping them separate from the Browns right now is being farther away from where the Browns do business. Like, that's got to be the only thing, right?
It may be the first time in history that the ownership group takes a hard look at the sporting on like both sides, and they're like, what if we just let the soccer guys run the NFL team because they seem to know what they're doing?
I mean, they hired a baseball guy to run it, and then he leaves, and then he leaves. Like Paul DiPodesta just left. So it's like, I don't know, man. They seem to be open to anything, but now they don't really even have a soccer guy. As Wilfred Nancy was officially hired by Celtic and unveiled
this week.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm nothing against Isatal, but I do wonder who drives the boat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think we all do. Yep.
Yeah. But the question I had in here, and this is more just a little vibey thing, but I'm curious if you have an away day you're keeping an eye on. I think DJ's obviously looking at Orlando there, but if there's any more interesting ones, the two jumping out to me were Seattle and Colorado. Both, in my thoughts, would be fun away days.
They are. They're also the ones that are kind of hardest because you got to go across a pretty decent part of the country. Colorado, I guess, is only 2.5 hours, but then you're like.
Yeah, that's like an 8-hour drive, honestly.
Yeah, well, that's more than an 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
It's more like 12. I mean if you want to like cannonball run it. Yeah.
Yeah, do you guys not cannonball run your road trips?
Yeah.
You never drive under 100 miles per hour.
Yeah. And got rid of your back seat and just filled it with gas.
Exactly.
So you don't have to stop. Anyways, no, look, like Seattle's always a ton of fun. Like the atmosphere there is great. It's like a fun excuse to visit it, which I think is a good way to look at it. they play every year, obviously, but Toronto, I think, is going to be interesting with Georgi Mihailovic playing there. And then just what the atmosphere was like. It was a different time, but with the Fire were the first American MLS team to play in Canada this year, this past year. And, just that atmosphere. And I think the crowds are going to be really good in the World Cup year in Toronto. So that'll be fun. And I mean, it's kind of weird, like not to just, drag Miami through the mud a little bit more, but normally you'd say new stadium and you're really excited about it. But like, I just don't particularly have an interest in going to Miami Freedom Park in 2026.
Nah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I would be right there with you. I mean, yeah. Just to add on that I meant to before, the official World Cup break for the Fire at this point is they play at home May 23rd against Toronto FC, and then they come back July 16th again at home against Vancouver Whitecaps. So a good what is that, 6-7 weeks there? I didn't mean to do it. I swear. I was actually just trying to count.
God dang it!
But 6 or 7 weeks off for the World Cup, roughly.
It should also be noted that break is very, very similar to what the Fire will likely be doing during the new windows, during the summer to winter and all that. So
yeah, it's so frustrating that they basically with MLS Cup later, the season starting earlier, it's like the exact footprint that they're going to be going to next year. But they're like, what if we just didn't switch the schedule? It makes no sense. Yep.
Well, hey, but then we wouldn't get to do our tiny little half season, Then we wouldn't
we
get
still
to do our
would.
clausura.
It would be 2026. It would be the beginning of 2026.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. You know what?
MLS is back for a bit.
MLS is back for a little while, and then it leaves. But then you get ready because it'll be back again. The other interesting standout from the schedule, the lone November game, November 7th, the Fire will have decision day against Columbus at home. That should be one that nobody has any issues getting up for. So hopefully it doesn't actually mean anything outside of seeding. There's no clinching opportunities there. That would be nice to have 2 years in a row. But it'll be a fun atmosphere, if nothing else. Moving on here, a couple other news pieces that I think were worth talking about a little more in depth. We've talked at length about Brian Gutierrez and his transfer dramas. Tim, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but no real news to report there. There was the report from Tom Bogert that Monterrey has officially submitted a bid. I do believe there was one that Chivas had as well. Chivas is Brian Gutierrez's, his boyhood club, but a club he rooted for as a child. Certainly his if he had a Liga MX team, that would be it. Reportedly in the price range the Fire are looking for. We know there's been several seven-figure offers coming from inside MLS, so you would imagine it's somewhere in that ballpark. Tim, anything to add reporting-wise, estimates or ideas?
Well, just that Tom Bogert reported that the Colorado Rapids took a very hard, made a very hard push to get Brian Gutierrez there when Georgi Mihailovic was sold to Toronto in the summer, and the Fire weren't interested. I think just given the situation, given the roster at that point, and also given the destination, whether it'd be a good move for Gutierrez, and I think the amount of money on offer. Although they did end up dropping $7 million, which who knows if that's what they're willing to offer for Gutierrez. But I think that it's certainly looking like a move is in the works. Now, a lot of things that happen and are in the works don't end up happening, and it's just a part of the business. I don't think I think Alex would agree with me on this. Like, he's the one that talked to Guti about committing to the USMNT. When the Mexican passport was announced for Gutierrez, some outlets made it sound like it was about maybe playing for El Tri. I would never say never with that, right? Like, if he's not getting call-ups for 2030 and Mexico is saying we would like to bring you to the World Cup and the USMNT has not been calling him, then sure, I think that a lot of players would give a lot just to have that opportunity. But I don't think that he wants to play for El Tri. I don't think that's his priority right now. I think this is about a move. And with two names of very big clubs that could afford him in Mexico, solidly linked with him, and I believe that there's some other interest from Liga MX teams as well. All the stars seem to be lining up, but again, things don't happen sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the interesting point as you talk about World Cup availability is Brian Gutierrez, I don't think this is like off the wall, like wants to go to the World Cup, as every soccer player does, right? And you do wonder if he would be ostensibly the starting 10 moving forward for the Fire because of Andre Franco's injury, right? So he would have at least a couple months of being the guy in the offense initiating the attack, as opposed to, you go to Monterrey, you go to Chivas, you may not be that guy right away. You would be in a new system with a new coach, with new players. You would be getting your footing under you. That may not be the best environment for him to actually take that step and try and secure a spot at the World Cup. The counter argument is obviously you go there, you play well at a very, very high level, you put yourself in a good position. But I am curious if that's a thing where maybe it benefits both sides to keep him around a little bit longer and then look for a move in the summer.
I'm not sure that like, look, in terms of like international call-ups, I don't think that he's close enough to the radar. He's been called into camps. I don't think that he's really going to be in Pochettino's plans for the 2026 World Cup. I don't think that he would make it onto the Mexican roster this year, like this cycle either. So I think it is about 2030 and like getting call-ups between now and then. And just in terms of like his opportunity with the Fire, down the stretch when Franco was injured, we didn't see Berhalter, using him the same way that we saw Andre Franco being used. And I think that that's saying something just about what, Berhalter thinks right now of his ability to affect games there. Now, the Fire had clinched and stuff, but we also saw that in, the must-win postseason games. So I do think that there's maybe an opportunity for him to play in a different system somewhere else. And like just on a personal level, right? Like I think that there's times that guys grow up in an environment and it can become too familiar, like friends and family are here, all of that. I think we sort of saw that with Georgie, where he made a move to Montreal that worked out, then made a move to Europe that didn't, and came back a much better, more mature player. And I think that, Brian Gutierrez, I think, could use changing something, because if he does want to make a World Cup, and I don't think this is number one priority, is getting minutes, making a difference. It's, something's got to change, and changing your environment is one way to make sure that things are changing.
Yeah, well put. Let's move on. We'll talk a little bit. Fire finally announcing their roster decisions. They took it all the way to the deadline, and even then a little bit later. Obviously, those things get turned into the league before they're announced. But a few quick notes, and then I think there's a couple interesting pieces to go through here. So first, Omar Gonzalez, semi-retiring from professional football. He's joining Fire 2 as a player coach. So I imagine he'll be something of an emergency center back, and also kind of mentoring some of the young guys coming up through the system. So Tim, we talked about how
I think that it's literally just him saying, yeah, I'd love to coach at the Fire 2. That'd be good over there, like that whole conversation. And then at some point, although I'm not going to maybe not want to lace up my boots at some point.
Yeah, it's like, could I be an option?
Sure, Omar. We'll find a way to make that work.
Now, how does that work under the roster rules, though? Is he technically available for a call-up? Like, is he a Fire 2 player? Like, how does that work? I do wonder a little bit if we'll see him one more time.
I want to say he's not going to be available because he technically... Yeah, like it's also one of those things where he's an assistant coach, and like, if you're calling Omar Gonzalez up, you already have a problem, considering CJ Cups would be...
Now, ironically, player coaches are allowed in MLS rules just as long as they don't have first team coaching responsibilities. So like it would have been okay for Omar to have coached Fire 2 this past year, while playing for the first team. Now, exactly, like there's limits on like how much you can do and all that. And like if you're playing games sometimes in other cities, like the question is like how much you're really available to help coach. Which is why I think this move makes sense. But there's restrictions on the age of players and other things that would basically prevent Omar from being the guy that gets called up.
Yeah, I don't think anybody expects to see him back for the first team next year. But great to keep him in the organization. Obviously, just a wealth of knowledge for a guy who has competed at the highest level of just about every level of soccer you could hope to. So congratulations to Omar on his semi-retirement, and we hope you enjoy being a coach, and hopefully don't do the old man thing of hurting your hammy or something the first time you get out there with the young guys.
Honestly, frankly, it just is awesome that he's still going to be involved with the Fire organization. Like, just, I know that he wasn't great for the Fire this year, but the guy is, both like a nice person. I think he's been a good mentor to people on the teams. Smart, but also just someone that has won like literally everything you can win on this continent. And having people like that in your organization, I think, is just a positive, right? And you want to do that, and you want like him to be able to talk to Fire 2 players, some of whom have hopes of having the career that he did, and have that presence of like, okay, this guy actually did it. Not that phenomenal coaches necessarily have to do that. I think a lot don't, but it just is awesome to have that around the organization.
Yeah, you just talk about building the pedigree of the org, and that's another thing that goes into it. A few more roster notes here. Tom Barlow and Brian Dowd both had their options decline. Romani Kwame did not have his purchase option exercised, so he will return to Cadiz at the end of, I don't know if he's likely already back, but it'll be officially, I think, as of January 1. Chase Gasper, his contract expired and he's officially retired from professional soccer. So, wishing Chase all the best in whatever comes next for him. Sam Williams had his option exercised. David Pareba was signed a new deal, which was for the same length of time. So likely just a slightly different number there and without the options. And then the players currently on loan, they made a note in the release saying the players currently on loan will be designated once they return from loan. So Omari still technically on loan with Loudoun United. The interesting question for Omari, and actually before we get to that, Georgios Koutsias still with Lugano. He's under contract for 2026 with an option in 2027. There were some reports, and DJ pointed this out. I hadn't actually seen them. He's been linked with AEK Athens, which he's from Greece, so not that surprising. A little bit of a mixed bag so far this season for Lugano, but still wearing the number 9 there. The traditional wisdom is he will not return to Chicago. Tim, any corrections there? Or are we all clear on what Koutsias' future looks like?
No, just the note, AEK Athens is the club that Frank Lopez played for while he was over in Greece. So there's, I guess that connection there, although I'm not sure how relevant that is to any of this.
Is Greg buying a third club, or is Joe buying a third club? Who knows?
I've got a whole thing about this. How it seems like the right number of soccer clubs to own is always 0. But
if it's not 1 and it's not 2, or if it's one, then it's not 2, it's 3. Right?
Exactly. 2 is the worst number of soccer clubs to own. Like almost exactly. So you never know. But no, Koutsias, I think that he just wants to be close to family in Europe. He's still, he's not been consistent getting minutes in Lugano, but I think that he still has a really high upside. And I think that his work ethic has always been really strong wherever he's been. And I think that makes him more of an asset to some clubs. The question would be just like the sort of like roster cap hit implications for the Fire with what the move is, if it's just as a permanent move to Lugano, what the transfer number would have to be for it to be sort of like get him completely off the roster, which they could take a loss on, or if they're able to get some GAM from the sale, which would require a fairly high number because it would need to be more than they bought him for.
And Tim, I know there was like a weird exception last year where there were qualifying offers from European clubs, and that's why they were able to essentially offload his entire salary and roster spot to Lugano. Is that something? I imagine it's more of a case-by-case basis with the league. Is that something where you could just extend that loan through the end of the 25-26 campaign for Lugano and kind of keep everything as is and then make a decision in the summer?
You would assume so. Obviously, the general cap rule is that you have to cover like the player's entire salary and then like some version of their acquisition costs on a loan to get them off the roster, which Kusi was this year. The issue is Lugano being a sister club. You don't really get like normally the league is like, we're not counting that loan as getting the guy off the roster. In this case, they did because there was a competing offer that apparently was bona fide. We don't know the terms of what that offer were. So I don't know what the negotiation would be. And this rule isn't written down anywhere that we just, normal humans can see it. And it may not be written down at all. But the question is if the offer was for a permanent move and not a loan, if the Fire could just go back and be like, look, they offered this much for the guy last year. We just want to extend the loan. It was that other sale was going to be a permanent sale, so just let us do this. I think that would be reasonable. I also think it's fair to say that this front office is better communication with MLS headquarters on a more frequent basis, and that probably earns you some social credit with these things. So.
I think to that point though, the likely the likely focus would probably be a permanent sale, just to likely best for everybody at that point. Get him off the roster without that kind of axe hanging over your head, but also giving Guti the opportunity to pursue something different and take that step forward in his career, because I don't know that it's taken quite the step he wants in Switzerland yet. The other guy still on loan that is worth talking about, I think, for one very specific reason, that's Omar Glasgow, still on loan with Loudoun United, technically through the first of the year. The only Omari under contract in 26, options in 27, 28. I don't expect Omari to be like a buyout, right? The interesting thing here is the Fire technically already over their international roster spot designations, which we'll talk about in a second here. And Omari was sent on loan to open up an international roster spot, right? So it does kind of beg the question, how close is he to getting a green card? Tim, you talked about with Guyana, not the easiest thing in the world to do. Or is he potentially a victim of we can only have so many international guys and we're not expecting you to see the field this year?
Yeah, I think that it's a question of all of those things, which make it a little bit more complicated. I know that the club has been putting Omar into a position where he's more likely to be able to get a green card. Now, obviously, there's a lot of national politics sort of things going on with green card appointments and all kinds of stuff like that could confound things. But I think that would certainly make it a lot easier for him to fit on the roster. If not, I mean, it's unfortunate that I think that he has a lot of promise for what he could bring to an MLS roster if it's not with the Fire or if it is with the Fire. But it just is really hard to fit him on a roster just given the rules and stuff. And I think that there are definitely some teams globally that would be interested in his services. I would be interested, and we talked about it last year a lot of I would just love to see Omar Glasgow play, 90 minutes a night, 80 minutes a night. And that's where I wonder if you can clear that international roster spot by loaning him out to Lugano and there's a place for him there. He's a guy you're interested to keep in the family. He has the promise. I agree with you, Tim. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was another MLS team that took a swing on him, somebody who, you look at, maybe not exactly Montreal, but a team like Montreal of a buy low, sell high, get a good young player making almost nothing and see if you can develop him into something. Because he did show promise, especially in that more traditional winger fullback role that Greg had those guys playing this year. And then I think to move on to maybe the most interesting point, and this ties in with our actual big transfer rumor of the day. Jack Elliott had his option exercised. There was no new deal for the captain of the 2025 Chicago Fire. Still available to sign an extension whenever he'd like, I suppose. But this is kind of complicated by there are reports coming out this week that the Chicago Fire in talks to sign South African center back Mbekezele Mbokaze from Orlando Pirates. He's 20 years old. A lot of hype around the young man as the next big South African prospect. And I do think it throws a wrench into what is Jack Elliott's future here? What is Joel Waterman's future here? Because we are all assuming a back four where nobody's expecting a back three. And now there's ostensibly 3 or 4 guys for 2 spots. So first of all, I mean, this is just going to show my North American centric bias here, but whenever you see Orlando Pirates, doesn't some part of your brain want to make them a minor league baseball team?
I'm going to be totally honest. For years, I thought they were just like an NASL team. And I was like, why are they in FIFA? And I literally never looked. I do that too.
How are you a pirate when you're in the center of the state, not close to any body of salt water?
Yeah.
And I want to make a point to you. Their nickname is literally the Buccaneers.
Well, that's what a pirate is, right? Like it's the same.
Yeah,
like it's like somebody took Tampa Bay and Orlando and went.
Yeah. Anyways, so I think that having center back depth it's almost like a meme in MLS of you can never have enough of it. And you can, and I think that that's true. Like we've seen that with, the Fire this past season, but a number of other teams that have lost a guy to injury, which is going to happen to your center backs at some point, like injury, suspension, something, and they don't have a top caliber backup option. And I think that at 20 years old, right, you're not expecting him to come in and consistently be a starter. I think Christopher Cupps, we saw him starting some, and then we saw his minutes kind of dry up down the stretch. I think that he just needs, that's not a bad thing. It just is to show that progress isn't linear, especially with young players. And I think having 2 options that are making a case for minutes is great, right? And, Jack Elliott returning, is awesome. He's a very expensive player. I think that he's a very good center back in the MLS. I don't think that he's in the conversation of being the best center back in MLS, and he's not paid that far off from, what those guys are paid. So I think that it becomes this gives, Jack Elliott like another kind of prove it year with picking up the option instead of giving him a new deal, and maybe some leverage in negotiating for the Fire of bringing that salary number down. And if you end up at the end of the year with 4 guys that you think are qualified to start, that's great, because somebody like one, Jack Elliott's going to be out of contract, and then you have somebody you could move on or whatever, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing, I think, and we talked about this last time, and you weren't here, Tim, unfortunately, is, because there was obviously the Walker Zimmerman announcements, and, we know about Greg and Walker's relationship. So it's like, is that going to be a likely move for the Fire? Seems clear they've gone in a different direction here, targeting a U22 as opposed to a max TAM potential low level DP in Walker Zimmerman.
U22 and not 32 going on 33. Yeah.
But it does kind of beg the question, like a lot of the reporting around the time Joel Waterman signed was a big part of this is Joel Waterman wants to play for the Canadian men's national team. And to do so, he needs to be playing at a higher level than what Montreal allows. And a lot of that as well was Montreal, announcing to the world that they need to rebuild their roster. But I think it's an interesting point of you've got Joel Waterman, who ostensibly wants those minutes and came here for those minutes. You have Christopher Cupps, who you need to give minutes to develop. Sam Rogers, who I think we're all confident is like, hey, he's kind of a vibes guy. And, if he needs to come in and play 45 minutes, he can, and you'll feel okay about that. Maybe not great.
I think that he's maybe a better option than that. But yeah, look, I think.
Yeah.
I think Sam Rogers looked like a number 3 on the depth chart that looked like a good option at a number 3. And by the end of the year, you were convinced that he could do a lot better as a number 2 on the depth chart. I don't think that you're right. Like, I don't think that he is a guy that you're confident as a starter game in, game out.
Mm-hmm. I also want to add in with both Mbakazi and Waterman, both are very likely to get called up to their national teams for the World Cup, which is a very big deal too. So you're looking at Rogers, you're looking at Cupps as when the window rolls around, yeah, the Fire have a break. Injuries can happen. Guys can get tired. They will want a break. So,
are you implying that Jack Elliott will not be playing for the England men's national team at the World Cup? Because I think there's a chance, DJ. I think there's a chance.
I think it's likelier West Virginia gets its own national team before Jack Elliott's.
They could always succeed. There's people there that never fully admitted to being in the union in the first place. So
there you go. Tim, I guess there's also DJ tossed a note in there as well about John Bell leaving Seattle. His option was declined. Fire reportedly had some interest there. I'm curious with you're correct in that you can never have too many good center backs. Cincinnati has proved that over the years. Cincinnati has also proved that you can be one of the best teams in MLS playing a back 3. Do we think there's any chance that this and potentially another move in that back line could lead to, hey, you know what? We looked really good at times in those back 3. It puts Leo and Andrew in the best position to get forward. Do you think there's any chance you could see a back 3 from Chicago Fire when the season kicks off next year?
So I think when the season kicks off is an interesting question, right? Because we talked about Franco and what he brought, and that was the other side of it, of like Franco on the other side of the ball was able to control the game offensively, and also the midfield was able to really help interrupt things before they made it to that back line. And Greg's, always been a 4-3-3 guy kind of by default. He will play in other formations depending on the situation. And I think that was here's the situation. So I think opening day, sure, I can see that. I think long run, I think Greg does want to be playing out of a 4-3-3 because essentially what you're doing is you're taking one of your center backs then and like taking that guy's spot and putting it somewhere closer to the pitch where they're more likely to be scoring goals on open play situations rather than just in set pieces. And hey, scoring goals is good. That's one way to win games. It's allowing them that I think was the issue. And that's why you added the third center back. And obviously it's better to have the personnel to do it than to be like, all right, so if they want to play a back 3, I don't know, Hugo Kuipers is kind of tall. Has anyone thought about you know what I mean? It's better to have the actual center backs that you can play there than trying to have to sub some guy in. Like we saw Andrew Gutman playing as a sort of ersatz center back at moments. So yeah, I mean, look, anything's possible beginning of the year, but I think long run, it's about the 4-3-3 and getting that to work.
Yeah, it makes sense. I do wonder. I do wonder how much Greg is looking at this roster and then this league and saying like there is an opportunity there and potentially changing things up. I agree with you. I think it's likely, most likely not the case. I do also look at the one thing we haven't really talked about because we haven't really talked much of Mbukaze because I don't think any of us are watching much of the South African Premier League or whatever they call it. Guy's about 6 foot, 180, not a particularly big center back, which is interesting given the stature of Joel Waterman, of Jack Elliott's, and Joel Waterman's not a huge guy, but he's bigger than that. And obviously, 20 years old, there's some filling out to do, but interesting there. And I'm curious to see how he's ends up being deployed in the preseason and just kind of what his role looks like on the team.
So, I mean, Greg Berhalter, by the way, was a very good 6'1" center back in his day. So I think maybe there's a little bit of history with that. Like you don't always have to be the tallest guy on the pitch to be an effective center back. And obviously at 20, I guess, yeah. Sorry.
Ironically, we say this, but in the last game Orlando played, Mbukazi was involved in injuring another player because he jumped on top of him.
So you're telling me we got a little bit of Carlos Terran here. That's good. We signed the Swedish Gaston. Yeah, the other way. We signed a Swedish Gaston Jimenez and a South African Carlos Terran. I like that. I think that could be good, guys. From there, I think the only other kind of big question is what holes remain on the roster, right? Just to run through the MLS off-season calendar and what to expect in December. On the 10th of December, free agency will begins. That's where the Fire got Jack Elliott last year. I don't have a full list of players in front of me, unfortunately, but there are a good number of guys who will be available in there. From December 11th through the 17th, there are the re-entry drafts. That's where you can go and grab Brian Dowd if you're interested in another goalkeeper. December 11th would also be the end of the year waivers. Essentially, if you're clearing a player, they have to clear through waivers. Fire haven't, and this is where we love having DJ on the staff, right? Because for the reentry draft, the Fire haven't selected a player since 2013. End of year waivers, Fire haven't selected a player since 2019. And then on the 18th, we will have the super draft. That is where you got such hits such as Dean Bolts and Brian Dowd again. Shout out Brian Dowd. Likely a Fire 2 pick, or you wonder if you'll get another GA guy, but the Fire picking at 18, so that seems unlikely. Nice to not have like a top 5 pick this year, huh, fellas?
It is, and it's nice to not have an expansion draft that people massively overinterpret who's left on the roster and not.
Yeah. Well put. I think, looking back over, we have kind of a working depth chart here. The big question right now is kind of that backup striker with Tom Barlow officially gone.
Yeah. And by the way, there's a number of center forward options that have options or are available, not under contract on that free agent list. Going from, I'm just trying to think off the top, and there's like a ton of guys.
Let me see if I can pull
Giacomo Brioni, from, ended up with CF Montreal after playing like 9 different places.
Christian Benteke is still
Christian Benteke,
for what it's worth.
Yeah, still has the option. I think that we assume that'd be picked up, and obviously that would be a DP level. Although
Kai Kamara
I don't think he wants to come back. It's like, and every year it's like he just signs later and later in the year. He's going to end up playing 1 game in 2026 and never officially retire. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good names there, like Christian Ramirez for the Galaxy. I think that is like, and again, you can't just like pick these guys up. I mean, you can if they're pending option and you pick up their option. That's the way that it works. Mikhail Ure from the Philadelphia Union is not under contract. I think, like Felipe Mora from the Portland Timber. I mean, there's like a ton of center forward names that you've heard.
Are you also just scrolling through it with me, or are you remembering all these names at once?
I am scrolling through it because I remember some of them. I remember thinking there's a lot of center forwards that are going to be available, and now going through it again, I'm like, there's a lot. Yeah, exactly. So like names that like you've heard maybe because they played some big moments for their clubs and stuff like that. I mean, if you want to go crazy about it, Joseph Martinez, we didn't mention.
I feel like I brought that up when it happened, and nobody wanted to talk about it. But I don't hate Joseph Martinez. I think part of that is he wants to go back to Atlanta, but still, like And now that Tata's back, it maybe makes even more sense. Guys, important note here: Sebastian Berhalter's option has not been picked up yet, so just keep an eye on that.
Teams don't have to announce their roster decisions if they're still competing, and that's part of it. And
yes,
that's why
that was the joke. If we're not clear on that, I'm not an idiot. Okay,
if Vancouver does not pick that option up, then I am guaranteeing that's because they are run by idiots.
They're not run by idiots is the thing. That's
Exactly.
that's the easternmost team, not the westernmost team in Canada.
Yeah. Two interesting names. One really, one not. I'm curious to see what Vancouver does with Ali Ahmed. You would imagine they would pick up the option, but who knows what that contract looks like and how it fits into next year. And you'd expect a couple guys to move on. The second one, Gyasi Zardes, still a free agent in MLS, guys.
I just said that.
Did you? I didn't hear you say it.
Yeah.
My bad.
See, Zardes was with the MLS pool, so I don't think he actually played any games this year or was even on the bench.
He did not.
No.
So,
he played for Austin in 2024, not this year. He would have been available for the Fire to pick up in the free agent market. But I think that just so that everyone gets the reference right, played a lot for Greg Berhalter with the U.S. men's national team, and I think that they overlapped for 1 year in Columbus.
Yes. Yeah,
they did. Yeah, because
toward 2017. Yeah.
So, and he looked very good in that 2018 season, from what I can recall. Although, like Greg Berhalter system again, just like makes guys in attacking positions in the field look good.
But so we say all of this to say we yap and yap and yap. December 10th, keep an eye out, right? A lot of MLS free agents will be available, a lot at that center forward position, and it would not be surprising to see the Fire's next, backup 9, as it were, coming from that group. And frankly, you look at the other options. You look around at attacking midfielder. You look at potential depth on the fullback positions, although we do seem to be okay there. The one last thing that I'll mention before I think we've got just about everything is we didn't talk about the implications of Mbukaze signing a U22 deal with Gutierrez still on the roster, Barroso, Davila, Radojevic, and technically Koutsias. Obviously, we talked about what Georgios is planning to do. Brian Gutierrez, I think we're all expecting to leave, but it's not a given. And then, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but both Barroso and Radojevic could be bought down to under their U22 number fairly easily, correct?
I am not 100%. We don't know the transfer fees, right? And I think that would be
yes.
We
only know
Radojevic. I do know could.
Like
I think Leo could be a little more difficult. I think the transfer fee is a little bit higher. And again, it just becomes a question of like, do you think that player is giving you enough for that cap hit that you'd be taking on, right? Because U22s are a minor cap hit, but then adding on a 7-figure transfer fee that has to hit the cap over the duration of the deal makes it a much bigger cap hit.
And there's the question of we don't know how Radojevic's actually going to play because he has not touched the field with a Fire yet.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I think that, look, this front office also has a lot of backup options with things. I mean, the other option would be he would not be the first guy to come to MLS and like hang out for a bit and then go back to Europe for whatever reason. I don't think that's likely with him. I know that they really trust him to provide backup minutes with Andrew Gutman. That was the plan going on, and like maybe just help push Gutman to continue being at his best. Not that he needed that this year in a career season, but
or just giving him the occasional night or two off so that he can be at his best when it matters most, right?
Not even a night or two, just like 15 minutes at the end of games. Just don't go 90 every. It's like,
hey, Andrew, you don't have to play 270 minutes in 8 days this week. I hope you know that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that'll be interesting to watch. I mean, I don't, from the information I am remembering and have in front of me, it's like the cap hit isn't crazy on Radojevic. I don't believe the transfer fee was particularly high. I think, again, when we think about MLS roster rules, sometimes even if it's not like necessary, it's easier to make those guys a U22 because the cap hit is just smaller, even if the cap hit would be manageable otherwise, at the outset of a new season. So
don't be a DP's status.
To be a DP,
one of those.
And the rosters, international roster slots, I think that we hinted at this, and Alex posted message on socials about this. as it stands, as of right now, there's 11 guys that would need international roster spots for 8 spots the Fire get. You can buy them. Buying 3 it starts to be like, you can start to tell it's, when someone's getting desperate, I think, and the price goes up as a result. It is possible some guys would get green cards. It may be even likely that a couple of guys would get green cards. I know that there's a plan. It's something to keep an eye on, because you would expect if the Fire are going to be adding a sizable piece, which may be more likely after the World Cup, given some of the names the Fire have been linked with guys of like, okay, I came over, I played in the World Cup in the summer, I liked it there, I don't have to worry about making a World Cup roster in 2026. This would be a good time for a move to MLS. But if they did try to make a move in the winter, it would mean that they would need to come up with one more than that. And like, that's a lot of, subtraction to be able to add.
A lot of subtraction to be able to add. I think there was like a sentence that described what it's like to try and cover MLS. That would be a good way of putting it.
It really is. It really is. I did not realize that I stumbled on what was like an insight. It's just been percolating on my brain of like, why do you have to subtract so much to add in this league?
And you know what, Tim? It's good use of percolating. The only thing I think we haven't mentioned that I'll give a quick shout to, Fire 2 officially signed Jason Nemo. So just one interesting to keep an eye on, yet another name in the never-ending Chicago Fire pipeline of goalkeepers that seem to show up.
They didn't officially sign Nemo. They officially announced that they had signed Nemo. And Alex will tell you about the frustration at the difference between those two things, because the signing happened at a time that was pretty far removed from the announcement.
Let's see. I'm looking back through Alex's article to see if there was an official date on it, but I don't see one.
You're not going to see one in there.
Yeah, no. Interesting. We talked about Owen Pratt in the last episode, ostensibly being that third string goalkeeper now that Brian Dowd is gone. Jason Nemo, another name to watch as you kind of look at Fire 2 next year in terms of guys who could be called up to the first team in the somewhat near future and in the probably more distant future. But exciting times for the young folks as they get their opportunities to make their first professional debuts, all that kind of good stuff. Fellas, anything else we want to add before we wrap up here? I think we've taken enough of the kind listeners' time.
Whatever you do, always remember, aim hard when you're throwing a snowball.
There you go, DJ. Well put. Well put. Tim, any final words of wisdom?
Throw harder.
Throw harder. And I will be the one who says, make sure there's no ice in your snowball. Don't be that guy. All right. Everything you do should be done with intention. Because you can kill someone,
ice
DJ.
hurts.
Well, that's the point. It's already cold. You can hide the body easier.
All right. Anywho, no, you can't hide the body easier because the ground is frozen, DJ. Think for once in your life. Anyway.
Exactly.
We don't just have gators in the lake outside of our house that we can just feed stray bodies to, okay? We're not
To be fair, if it's killed by ice, you can allege that it just fell off somehow.
If it's killed by ice, they'll probably be denying it and saying it was part of their job, and there'll be a huge cover-up.
Tim, you can't blame that 49-year-old who didn't finish high school for that. That's not fair. Anyway, thank you so much for being here and for joining us around the bonfire. It's a pleasure to have you, as always. We are glad to be back. A little bit of taking a break and a little bit of technical difficulty set us back a little bit in the off season. If you missed our last few episodes, I would definitely recommend going and giving them a listen. We broke down even deeper into the roster pre some of these moves. It was myself, DJ, and Alan on that one. So would highly recommend going to give that a listen. We'll do our best to keep to these, recording Sundays, posting Mondays as more news comes out and we have more things to talk about in the world of Chicago Fire. You can always stay tuned to the website as well, menofred97.com. That's where you'll find all the latest in-depth reporting, the roster trackers, all that kind of good stuff. If you are wondering what exactly is going on in the world of MLS as the seasons start to change. And we are only... like 10, 12 weeks away from the new season, right? If that's kicking off a little earlier this year with the World Cup break. And stay tuned to socials, Men in Red 97, just about everywhere that you would follow somebody, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, all that good stuff. We'll be there. We'll be posting. We'll be keeping an eye out for what is yet to come. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, for listening, for joining us in these cold months as we get ready for more soccer that will also be played in cold months in 2026. Thank you to our illustrious producer, Austin, for making us sound good. For DJ and Tim, I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.